Dear students, this will be my last lecture on money, on the subject of money. Last time I explained to you how the working of one small business can be described in terms of the flow of money. Now, a country's economy consists of millions of businesses, small, medium, large, plus there are farms, plus there are services. So the economy is huge and it is very complex and it's full of variety. Each of them you can study like I explained last time. But how do you try to understand the whole made up of so many small parts? Broadly speaking, they say there are three sectors: agriculture, industry, and services. For example, software is in services, banking is in services, okay. Making cars is industry, farming, like that. So you are trying to form an idea of the whole economy. So what role does money play? So obviously money is circulating through the economy from one business, one person to the next, etc. That we looked at last time. So how effectively it circulates is described by a word known as velocity. It's the money moving through the economy effectively without hindrances. If it's moving, the economy is assumed to be doing well because that's in human nature. To earn and to spend and to live, that's our life. Well, that's one part of our life. So, aggregate, if you try to look at for the whole country, there are factors like how much money is available within the economy, the total stock of money, how effectively it is moving, velocity. And the third thing is how much does it cost for me to borrow money? That is the interest rate. The interest rate is nothing but the cost of having to borrow money. Now, two of these things, the total quantity and the cost of borrowing, by and large, the Reserve Bank of India regulates and monitors this. Okay, that is the job of one of the main jobs of the Reserve Bank of India. The functions involved are of course performed by all the banks, but the Reserve Bank is the bank of all the banks. So whatever functions we are saying may not be performed directly by RBI, that is the at the center, but other banks lend to the businesses and so on, to the farmers, to the businesses. So the money is regulated throughout the economy, the quantity as well as the cost of borrowing. So when the economy is slowing down, RBI tends to reduce the interest rate so that people find it easier to borrow money, less of a burden. If the economy is heating up too much, they may increase the interest rate to avoid what is known as overheating, make it a little more expensive to borrow money. Then there is the quantity of money. The velocity is not decided by RBI, please understand. That is decided by people. How positive they are about their business or investing or buying new equipment or spending. So ultimately, people make up the economy, right? Not the RBI or any other bank. They are there to provide a service, to provide a function. So if people are optimistic and active and they energetically invest more, buy from here, sell there, value addition, add value, innovate, then you find that is a positive outlook for the economy and the velocity will tend to be higher. But when people are in an opposite frame of mind, hesitant to invest or hesitant to spend, not so optimistic about the future, then the velocity will be lower. So the velocity cannot be decided by any authority. You decide how you deal with your money. Like that, millions of people decide. So, three things: quantity, cost of borrowing, and velocity. Two things very much RBI regulates, monitors, etc. It operates through all the banks. That is the total quantity and the cost of borrowing. The quantity nowadays doesn't have to be in paper notes, you understand. It can be electronic. Nowadays, money can be purely in electronic form. So the amount of money in circulation at any given time will be far more than what you may see in the form of paper notes. Okay. Lot of it will be credit. Lot of the money created is in the form of credit. It is given to a business against some collateral so business can invest. Like the example we saw last time, the 20 lakhs invested in the store, some of it was borrowed. That's why there was an interest payment every month. So that is the money acting through the whole economy. Once again to remind you, the total quantity including credit, the cost of borrowing and the velocity, which is decided by people indirectly by how they behave. The banks effectively have two rates. If you deposit money in the bank, you will get interest at a lower rate. But if you borrow from the bank, you'll have to pay at a higher rate. So banks have their own differential in rates from which they get their revenue. So that is the way banks function. Okay. Your savings account may get only 4%, but when you borrow for a home loan, you may be paying 10%. Okay, whatever. That's how the business operates. Now, to judge how big is an economy consists of millions of businesses and tens of millions of people and farmers and everybody. There is a way to judge, that is gross, the people call gross domestic product, GDP. Now this is a very difficult quantity to judge, but it's the best that economists have. So using various techniques, they estimate what every person contributes or every group of persons. You may not be able to contribute, cost of contribution of every farmer or every laborer, but as a group, you have so many million farmers, this is the total production and so on, as a group. So total, add it up, including businesses, and avoid any double counting. Okay. If A is selling to B some item worth 1 lakh rupees, it should not be counted twice in A's account and B's account. So avoid double counting, add up all the things in money terms, and then that figure comes out GDP. That gives some indication of how big an economy is. It's not a very good indication. In fact, I'll give you a simple example to make you think about GDP. Now, this point you must think. Okay, suppose I sell you a decent quality smartphone for, let's say I'm a retail store owner. Okay, I sell you officially against a receipt. a decent quality smartphone for say 8,000 rupees. Good product, reasonable price, you are happy with it. So that transaction would count as 8,000 rupees worth of sales and eventually get into the aggregates of the whole country. 8,000 rupees. Now suppose I am a cheat. I am not, but assume I am a cheat. And just by giving you false representation and hype and all that, for the same phone, I just essentially, you know, hype the whole product and its benefits and all that, hide the reality, lie, and sell it to you for 15,000 rupees. So the extra 7,000, which I somehow cheated you out of that extra amount, doesn't add to your, you know, functional value in life. It's still the same phone, same features. That if I had been honest, I would have sold you for 8,000. But because I am dishonest, I sold you for 15,000. But you don't know that you have been cheated. You use the phone same way. So the value addition in your life is still same. It comes from the phone. You get the same value. Talk to friends, check your mail, social networking, whatever. It's the same phone working in the same way. But now in official records, it shows as a sale of 15,000 instead of 8,000. So the number is exaggerated. Same goes for anybody. Say doctor, he could have cured you for 5,000, but for some reason, because of additional tests and so on, the bill came to 20,000. But it's the same cure. You are healthy either way. So the extra money doesn't give you extra health. Same way, the extra money doesn't give you extra features in the phone. I just cheated you. So what is evidently a wrong thing to do, to overcharge for something, looks good because it's bigger business. So GDP is not looking at what value you get out of what you buy, but only the monetary amount that you paid. So overcharging is not compensated in some sensible way. So how much of GDP is actually resulting in value addition in your life and mine and everybody else's? That question is impossible to determine because we are only judging how much money changed hands. So if several times additional, money changed hands for the same value, it looks as though GDP is much bigger, but the value is same. Ultimately, you have to judge your life by the value. I have to judge my life by the value, not by how much money is going here and there. It's the phone that gives you value, right? Or I buy something nice in the market. That thing is adding value to my life. Money is only a means of attaining that additional value in life. So if the money value is exaggerated, it looks good in the GDP, but it makes no difference to your life or mine. So GDP figure should not be taken as a literal truth, It's a very rough indicator and many examples can be cited. Even Raghuram Rajan, who was our RBI governor, had examples like this just to remind people that GDP is not an accurate number. But you need something, okay, very rough estimate. Okay, just like sometimes students say that your CGPA is not the best indicator of how good a student is. Okay, this is something similar, but maybe there are more inaccuracies in the GDP. A lot of the economy is barter economy. People exchange something in a village, in smaller settings or between neighbors. they exchange. So that never gets recorded, but it's still economy. Barter is also economy, but never gets into the figures. So anyway, GDP, some indication is needed, and economists like to compare, different economies, America, Russia, China, India, all that. So you need some way of comparison. But I just wish to point out that it's by no means accurate. Okay, so that is the second point, GDP. If people are working hard and if they are positive about the future generally, then they like to invest something, start a new business, start a new store. Young person will have some innovation and start up, buy some machinery for the farm, whatever, open a new bank branch. So there is a growth. If things are going well, then some surplus is created, some savings they are put back in the form of investment. So if things are going well, the GDP grows. If things are not doing well, the GDP doesn't grow so well, and in extreme situations it may also decline. That is considered very unfortunate. Okay. In India, a lot depends on the how good the monsoon is, but there are other factors like now this pandemic will have an effect on our economy. It already has had an effect, some more effect on our economy, and the rate at which GDP grows will definitely come down. So this is how I'm making a kind of a brief overview of how you go from one business to economy as a whole. In that, I essentially, just to summarize today's module, the last one on this topic, is that first I talked about money, the quantity and the cost of borrowing and the velocity. Then I briefly talked about GDP and the growth. On the growth point, on GDP point, my main reminder to you was don't take it as a very accurate number. Okay, how much money you have in your bank account, to the last rupee accurately, 2371, say. GDP is not an accurate number like that, but it's a rough indicator. Second thing is growth. Any healthy economy tends to improve itself. Healthy includes not just the numbers. Health includes your outlook. If people are not positive in their outlook, the economy cannot be healthy. Economy doesn't exist outside of the people. It's not in the numbers, it's in the people. Do they work hard? Are they optimistic? Are they clever about where to invest, where not to invest? They work hard, then economy will grow. So please remember, the economy is in the hands of the people. These numbers are only reflecting approximately how this aggregate economy is behaving. All right, so this is the last lecture on the economy. These are a few points